Good afternoon, and welcome to today's edition of American Literature in a Time of Coronavirus. You know, we all have been hearing a lot about the coronavirus and that we need to take a lot of extreme measures to protect ourselves. But I got to thinking, you hear about computer viruses all the time. Maybe we should protect ourselves from that. So here I am with my special magic mask that will keep me safe from computer viruses. Okay, well, if that didn't get a laugh, it's not going to now. So we'll get rid of this and go on with today's lecture, if I can. Okay, there we go. I hope that you're all well and in good health, and I hope that you're all continuing to work hard on both your reading and your writing assignments. Let's talk a little bit about what you have coming due. Friday, April the 10th, you should turn in to me the exercise on Rule 22 from the Elements of Style. Turn that in by Friday, April the 10th. I emailed it to you a while back. You need to be working on your papers, and you need to have started writing, and particularly, I hope you are now writing the portion of your essay that compares and contrasts the quotations from Emerson and his essay Self-Reliance and the prophet Jeremiah, because that's going to kind of form the foundation of the rest of your essays. For most of you who turned in outlines, that will be Roman numeral 2 under your outline. You need to be working on that, and try to send me a draft of that by Monday. Now then, by next Wednesday, April the 15th, if you have submitted an entry into the Bulwer-Lytton fiction contest, email a copy of it to me, because I will be on the 16th of April, that's 1 week from the day that I think you'll be looking at this. I want y'all to talk about that. I will try to set up some way that we can discuss those and hopefully laugh about those together. April 20th, I want to see your final outline for your paper. You've done a draft of it. I want to see the final outline, which should include what examples you are going to use to support each of the points of your discussion about each character. April the 27th, I want to see the rough draft of your paper. May the 4th, let's have a second draft. And then, of course, May the 11th, you need to turn in your final paper. So keep those in mind. Now, let's get back to Rule 22 in the Elements of Style. You'll remember that rule which is the last thing that is actually labeled as a rule, was place the emphatic words of a sentence at the end. The words that you think are most important, what you really want to say with your sentence, you should probably put the words at the end. We talked about a few exceptions, but in general, that part of your sentence that's most important, you should structure it so that the words are toward the end. And the same idea should apply to your paragraph and to your entire essays or your entire anything you're writing. The things that you really want to emphasize should be at the end so that people will remember them better. We passed out an exercise, or I emailed it to you, for you to practice doing that. And by Friday, April the 10th, I want you to have done that exercise and sent it to me. These things are being counted as part of your participation grade in my class. So if you don't do it, I'm assuming that you're not watching these essays. I'm assuming you're not doing anything. And we'll assign a grade to you accordingly. So please get those done. Now, as I said, that was the last part of this book as a rule that is actually labeled as a rule. There are some suggestions and some hints and some other things in the remainder of the book, but these are the main rules. And I want to talk about these rules a little bit. Back in September, when our time together began, we talked about why we write. And the reason that we write, we agreed, was to communicate, to express whatever thoughts we have that we care to express to another person. And that's the purpose that we write. So why do we have these rules? Well, let's think again about the process of communication. A thought, an idea of whatever kind, begins in our minds. And originally, at its inception, it is a lot of electricity whirling around between narrow little gaps in our between nerve endings in our brains called synapses. And somehow, through a process we really don't understand, our brains organize those electrical impulses into thoughts that are translated into words that are then translated into, through our bodies, translated into letters and symbols on a page, or these days on an electronic device that encode our thoughts in a format that a receiver can then look at and visually receive and implement and understand, and they end up being electrical currents bouncing around in that receiver's mind. So it's an elaborate process. It's amazing, miraculous that such a thing can happen, way beyond human comprehension, but we can mess it up. We can't create the process, but we can mess it up, and we can do so particularly in the process of encoding our thoughts, putting them down on paper or into a computer electronic device in the English language. And that's where these rules come in. These rules enable us to encode our thoughts in such a way that the receiver, our reader, can decode them and get the same thought or something close to it. And we have to have these rules. I think we have explained why logically most of these rules are the way to go, but even if not, we just have to have rules to ease this process along so that it will work. Now, I've told you that before. I'm telling you now that following these rules to make this process of communication as easy as possible is a sign of character. It is a sign of what kind of person you are. First of all, if you decide not to follow them, if you're lazy in following them, it tells your reader that you don't respect yourself. Because if you have a thought that you think is worthy of being passed on to another person, but you don't go to the trouble of making it easy for the other person to understand and encode, then it tells me that you don't think your thoughts are really that important. You don't respect what's in your own mind. And if you don't, why should I? So it shows a lack of respect for yourself, and it also shows a lack of respect for whoever you expect to be reading what you write. Because you say, well, I don't care whether they get what I'm saying or not, which raises the question, well, why are you bothering to write it down if you don't care whether it's easily understood by the person who's going to be reading it? So this is a test of character. It is a way that you show that that you respect yourself and that you respect your reader. An additional thought, and this is a thought that you may not have associated with your schoolwork, but remember Matthew chapter 26, where our Lord, speaking to people, talked about the final judgment and how people were going to be judged and divided between sheep and goats. And he told them, you know, some of you I'm going to say, well, you fed me when I was hungry, and you clothed me when I was naked, and I was a stranger and you took me in. And all of these people said, well, Lord, when did we do that? We don't remember that happening. And he said, inasmuch as you have done it unto the least of these, my brethren, so have you done to me. Now, that's a principle that I think applies to all of our actions, or certainly all of our social interactions. The way that we treat other people is the way that we're treating our Savior. We should be viewing him in them. And so have some concern for them. Try to make reading what you write as easy as possible, and make it where they can understand it, because that is, once again, that is a matter of what kind of person you are and whether you value other people or not. So I've preached to you a little bit. By now, I hope you have started on part 3 of the moviegoer. It's been assigned. We're going to talk for just a few minutes, and today's lecture is not going to be very long, but we're going to talk for just a few minutes about part 2. There are a couple of more things I want you to think about. Early in part 2, Binks arrives at his little basement apartment in Gentilly and finds there a letter or a memo from his great-aunt Emily, in which she references to him a quote from the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius about how he ought to act. What kind of person would do that? What kind of person would send a quote like that to another person? What would you think if I was sitting there telling you stuff like that? Some of you may remember who Marcus Aurelius is. I think that you have had kind of a world history course somewhere. He was a Roman emperor about 160 A.D., but his real fame is as a synthesizer of Stoic philosophy. He wrote a book called The Meditations, which was basically like his diary or his journal, where he kept all of these thoughts that were based and founded on Stoic philosophy. And the Meditations became and still are sort of a text for Stoicism. They give us an idea of what the Stoic philosophy was. So is this old lady encouraging Binks to adopt Stoicism as a life view? And if she is, what does that say about her? Why would she do that? Give that some thought. It's important as we go through this. Now, of course, the Stoics were Greeks and Romans, and we associate them with sort of a classical sympathy, a mindset that has classical tastes. And we're going to run into a romantic or two as we go along. So think about that, because perhaps our author is setting up a conflict here between classicism and romanticism as philosophies. Think it over. We have another segment of part 2, a little section, where Binks tells us out of the blue that he has, for some reason, become acutely aware of Jews. He tells us that when a man who is on a search, such as he is, encounters a Jew, it's like Robinson Crusoe finding a footprint on the beach. Why would he say that? I'm assuming y'all have read Robinson Crusoe. I hope you have. But why would Binks say that? And what could a Jew have to do with his search, which he's discussing when he brings this up? That's a curious thought. A third thing I want you to think about is the trip to Chicago that's coming up. You'll remember that after the Friday sales luncheon meeting at the main office of Uncle Jules's stock brokerage, he's called into Uncle Jules's office and goes through a long episode which ends up with Binks being told that he is going to miss Mardi Gras in New Orleans because he's going to take a trip to Chicago to a convention of mutual fund brokers salesmen. Because no one else wants to go. Everyone wants to be in New Orleans for Mardi Gras. And particularly Uncle Jules does. Now, up to this point, Binks has expressed a great bit of disinterest in Mardi Gras, to the point to where he's not going to participate in his own cruise parade and ball and party associated with the festival. He appears not to care about it at all. But then when he's told, well, you're going to go to Chicago, his reaction is strange. And it's not so much that he dislikes the idea of missing Mardi Gras, as he says that he fears that if he goes to Chicago, he'll become no one, nowhere. Why would he think that? Now, he has talked about this before, about the concept of not being anywhere, of your existence being no place. That's a strange idea for us. I don't know that I have a completely full grasp of what he means of it, but he really dislikes the idea of going to Chicago, and yet he has to do it. Go back and read through that, and then give that some thought in comparison to other parts of the novel that you've read, particularly with regard to the vertical search, the horizontal search, particularly with regard to his discussion of his time spent in the biology lab dissecting pigs when he was in college, and how his lab partner could have been anywhere and didn't care, whereas to Binks, apparently, location matters. And he's talked about that. He's talked about how he has to really have a feel for the location of the movie theaters that he goes to. So, give some consideration to that. The next point I want to talk to has to do with Binks's discussion of the evening radio program, This I Believe. Now, y'all are not familiar with anything like this. When I was, up until the time I was a teenager, late at night, if you listened to the radio late at night before the station went off, which they did in those days, there was always some kind of radio broadcast that was supposed to provoke some kind of deep philosophical thought in your mind. And Binks was making fun of that with This I Believe. And I remember those programs, and there was always some person who had some kind of moderately important accomplishment, either or standing either as an intellectual, as an author or a poet or a playwright or someone of that nature, or perhaps as a scientist, and they would come on and give you some kind of deep philosophical thought before the radio went off for the night. And Binks is poking fun at that with This I Believe. But he makes a comment about these people, and he talks about how they're the most amazing people that you can imagine, with deep, serious thoughts and noble sentiments. And he talks about how nice they are, that these people are all nice. And you get the feeling that maybe he's not too nuts about niceness, especially in the context of his earlier comments that all of the nice people seem dead and only the haters seem to be alive. So I want you to think about 3 words here. The first one is niceness. Think about what we mean when we say that a person is nice. What does that describe? If I were to tell you that one of your classmates was a very nice person, what would that mean to you, and what does it think? What do you think about it? Now then, the next word is morality. What does it mean to say that a person is moral? So yes, this is a very moral person, or that's a very immoral person. What does that mean? Is moral the same as nice? Are they different? Is one more serious than the other? Compare those and think about those. Think them over. And then now here's a third word that I want you to think about in comparison and contrast to the other two, and that's goodness. What does it mean to say a person is good? Or the opposite, to say that person is bad? Is it different than nice or not nice? Is it different than moral or immoral? How do they relate? Can a person be nice and bad? Can a good person not be nice? Can a moral person be bad? Can an immoral person be good? What are your thoughts about that? If you wanted to brighten my mood, you would spend some time thinking about this and put your thoughts into an electronic format and send them to me. I'd like to hear from you and know what you think about it. There might be a little extra credit for you if you do that, not a promise. But think that over. I'd like to hear from you. Comparing niceness, morality, and goodness. And why is it that Binks is so apparently dismissive of the niceness of the people on this, I believe? You'll notice that he goes on and he says that he's met some of these people, and what he finds out is while they're very nice and they love everybody, when it comes down to one specific person or another, they hate other people's guts. Is that possible? Is it possible to be nice and actually hate other people? What do these words mean, and what do they play in our vocabularies and in our thoughts? Those are all interesting things to think about. So, you should have finished part 2 of The Moviegoer, as I said, and we are descending further and further into Binks's despair, if you want to call it that, and indicates whatever it is, mental illness perhaps. She goes to a psychiatrist. Maybe it's because she's sick. Perhaps she has despair. Go back and read the epigraph from Kierkegaard at the beginning that talks about despair, and give that some thought. And then as we get into part 3, the action's going to heat up a little bit. Things are going to get a little bit livelier, and we'll see some interesting developments, including on the Sharon Kincaid front with Binks and his efforts to seduce her. That's what he's trying to do. So read on into that. Be working on your papers. I need to see those final outlines when you have them ready. So be working on those. I'd like to see how you're doing with establishing the difference or similarity between Emerson's ideas and Jeremiah's. So you're not going to get a grade on that, but do send it to me. You will be getting a grade on your final outlines. So be working on those, get them ready, and remain healthy. Use your mask to protect yourself from viruses of all kind, both corona and computer. And stay safe, and remember your prayers. That's all we have for now. Enjoy your weekend. I will communicate with you again next week.